So the next thing that I want to talk about on here is the selecting the right targets, markets, hospital surgeons, administrators. Don't spin the wheels. This selling robots, and for those that have never sold a robot, this is a massively labor intensive thing, is to sell the robot. This is I think, one of the most complex sells that's out there. So it doesn't matter what robot you're selling. If you're an MMI and you're selling Simani, if you're selling a Procept, if you're selling an Andromeda, if you're selling anything that's out there, this whole process of getting the capital through capital appropriation committees and through robotic user groups is massively labor intensive. And the more specialties you touch, so if you're just in Procept, you're only touching urology, so you only have one specialty. When you're a multi-arm robot, or a robot for multi-specialty, you are going to end up having to talk to everybody. And you'll get thrown real curveballs, because you'll be in there talking to the urologist and the gynecologist and the general surgeon. And at some point, they'll just say, oh, I'm sorry, you can't do tours, which is ENT through the mouth. You can't do tours. And you say, but you don't do tours here. And they say, no, I know, but the tour surgeon has decided that they want to do this in the near future, and therefore you can't do it. So unfortunately, we can't talk to you. So again, you can end up spinning your wheels, spending 18 months, which is a lot of time, money, effort, and burn if you're a startup. And you can end up with actually no business at the end of it. So the word that's in that line, that third line down, I don't know if my cursor even works on here, probably not. But that line there is targeting. I just see everyone running out and just spreading everywhere, running through the cornfields, trying to grab whatever they can. Every person who comes to the booth, oh, I'm interested in robotics. Oh, well, let's get you signed up for a demo. You're all going to go out of business before you've got through all your demos. This is expensive stuff. Your marketing teams, your senior management have to be super targeting, and you have to start really understanding the market and spending lots and lots of time working out which is our market that's right for us. Which kind of hospital in that market is right for us? Is this for teaching hospitals? Are they our big bang? Is this for a general hospital out in the middle of nowhere? Is this for an ASC or a clinic? Is this for an outpatient department? You've got to really work that out. And then you've got to say, what surgeons? So surgeons breaks down into specialty. So, are we just going to go and chase everybody and ignore the urologists? Well, you can't do that. And this is a big mistake I'm seeing people make, because often there's a thing like a robotics user group or a decider group where the surgeons in the hospital will all sit and decide which robots. And they quite often will turn to the urologist and say, well, could you use this for your prostate? And they say, never heard of it, never seen it, not validated, no, I'm never using that. Or they'll say, yeah, I've seen it, I've used it, don't like it, I love my Da Vinci. So again, you've got to break out your surgeon users by specialty and make sure that you're covering all the specialties that are going to impact the sale or the purchase of your robot. And if you're someone out there from the hospital side out there as well, I would give a piece of advice, having been through over 200 robotics user groups. You have to temper the voices of the robotics experts, because many of these new systems will not replace the Da Vinci, but they will be superbly good for the people who didn't get on with the Da Vinci in the first place. So again, just if there's any buyers or there's any hospital administrators on, really think carefully about the balance of voices within your robotics user groups or within your assessment committees, because you can end up with a very skewed view, which won't reflect the reality of what that robot might bring to certain groups. And you don't have to think of just a Da Vinci does everything. There might be an area, say in your outpatient department, where something like a Moon Surgical or a distal motion may be better suited. There may be a certain group of your users within your hospital who just really need to be more in the laparoscopic paradigm. So something like a CMR might be better, or you might have an SSI or a Medtronic Hugo might just work better there. So again, from the business side, the company side, breaking your segmentation out is critical. And again, I'm going to ask the question, how many people on this call really understand their segmentation? If I could say to you, name me the key markets that you're going to go after, be that countries, regions, segments of your hospital, which markets are you going to go after? Which piece of Florida are you going to hit and why? Are you going to go for the main urban areas? Or you can go out for the rural areas? Within that grouping, how many of you can name perfectly the hospitals and why? What kind of hospitals are we going after and why are we going after those kind of hospitals? And then have you classified which specialties and which surgeons you're going after and why? What is it about your system that goes with a unique selling proposition that really is going to light up those surgeons or those hospital administrators? It can also be those as well. The reason I say this is just going out and running around hoping you're going to sell to everybody, you are going to burn your company away. If you're a startup, you will go under before you make enough sales. And if you're a sales director who's on this call listening, you'll get fired because basically you won't land anything fast. Instead, my strongest advice to everybody is really do your segmentation up front. If you have to spend 3 weeks all sat round a table to really understand it, then make sure you understand it. Because the answer is we can sell to everybody and everyone and everything in every segment. It's just nonsense because you're up against Intuitive, who can do that. You as a startup can't do that. Now, if you're in a specialty robot, something like an Andromeda or a Procept, then of course you're going to go to the urologist, but which site of care, which hospitals, which departments, all those things are going to be really important. Which administrators are important to you? Don't spin your wheels. Don't spend and let your sales teams and your marketing teams market to everyone and sell to everyone. Find out your targets, find out where you resonate, and really zoom in on that. I think that's a crucial piece for that. And again, if you're a hospital or a hospital administrator, the best thing that you can do to make sure you get the right purchase is to be upfront and clear and get in your minds, who are you? What do you really want and need? What is it that your surgeons really want and need? And it's not just, oh, we'll just go with Intuitive. I think that you have to be, the two sides have to meet in the middle because this is a team sport from both sides. And this is a partnership that gets built for 7 years. So, just going and saying, well, we're just looking for a robot, it's not the answer. You need to be able to give the companies really hard indications of what you want. So I'm a hospital with 12 Da Vinci's, and I've got every rep from every company knocking on my door. And I know in my heart that I'm never changing my sterile services. I'm not having different digital applications. I'm not having different stock on the shelves. I'm not going to buy new baskets to sterilize their product. I'm not going to buy new ultrasonic washers to sterilize their product. I'm not going to have arguments within the departments. I want that any urologist could use on any machine. You've already made your mind up. And thinking, just going out there trying to get a better deal off the companies, well, all you're going to do with that is you're going to put all the companies out of business. I would really appreciate if everyone can be just honest and upfront and say, this is what we are looking for. Now, conversely, if you've got people saying, well, we've got an Intuitive, but we'd really like a different offering for our outpatient department, and we'd like something that's a bit lighter, a bit smaller, more compact. We've got limited storage space, something like a Moon, no console, right? There's an option. Then you can genuinely evaluate it. A distal motion is slightly smaller, a CMR is slightly smaller. So these are the sort of things that I would also ask from the purchasing side, where you can do the industry a favor and they can do you a favor. Have your sheet and say, anyone who wants to come and talk to us about a robot, this is really what we're looking for. And save yourselves time and save them time as well. And then on the spinning of the wheels, from the industry side, you will do a lot of, I think I worked out it was 500 touch points. That's emails, phone calls, meetings, demos, visits, setup from different people in your organization. It will take you about 500 touch points to be able to conclude and sell a robot if you're not in Da Vinci, that's for sure. I don't know how many they do exactly, but it's about 500 interactions. And it usually is anywhere between 6 to 18 months to get that done. So there's a huge amount of work that goes into that. So don't spin your wheels, target, get it really targeting. And then when you've done that, have you got a really tight, robust selling process end to end? That process is really well defined in the world of capital and robotics, but especially robotics. And robotics is different than selling something like a CT scanner or an MRI. Luke Hares, which was one of the founders of CMR Surgical, one of the things that really stuck out in my mind of what he said is when people said to him, what's hard about robotics? His words were the whole damn thing. And I do think that from the tip of the instrument to the plug in the wall, everything in it is really, really hard, right? And the problem with robotics is surgical robotics, like a Da Vinci style, you're selling capital, you're selling software, you're selling service, you're selling disposables, you're selling reusables, you're selling disposables, you're selling electromechanical, you're selling plastics, you're selling drapes, you're selling service to all of these different segments of the hospital. So for urology, gynecology, general surgery, thoracic surgery, if you don't have a robust selling process that really narrows that down and makes sure that you're hyper efficient, it's a nightmare. So again, any of the startups listening, get yourselves a really good selling process. Now, I was a bit of a lunatic for Salesforce, and no one ever filled it in anyway because everyone hated Salesforce. But whatever it is that you're going to use, you need to have a really robust selling process that you can all identify, that's sort of broken into boxes of things that you've got to do. And remember, you're selling to the surgeons, the OR staff, but more importantly, you're selling to the C-suite, which is the management that actually buys the thing for the hospital. And you've got to have a robust, compartmentalized selling process for all those things that happen in that chain.
Hey everyone, just one quick second to ask a big favor in the middle of this. It really helps me if you hit like, hopefully you like it, but subscribe and turn notifications on. And the reason for that is that a lot of these videos are going to come out in multiple parts. And rather than you trying to work out when it's done or hope that you see the announcement that it comes out, if you put on the subscribe and the little notify bell, when I put up the new content, it will automatically come to your YouTube and it'll give you a little notification. So if you can just subscribe, like, and again, comments, very, very welcome. If there's other things you want me to do these sessions on, put them in the comments. That will help my channel immensely. And yeah, it will keep these things coming. So yeah, help me out.
If you can't log it all, and that person, let me tell you, how do you do the prospecting end of the funnel? You've got your USP, you've decided on your targets, how are you going to go and prospect them? How do you do demos? How do you run a demo? When should the demo happen? Does the demo happen at the end or does it happen at the beginning? Because one of the problems might be, for example, in your selling process, you go and demo everybody. Everyone's a potential winner, so therefore you demo everybody. You spend tons of money, time, and effort doing demos for people who are never going to get to the end of your sales funnel. So getting that demo in the right place. When do you take the robot to the hospital and do the full demo there? How do you get the C-suite involved? What does the selling process look like? When do you get the chief information officer of the hospital involved if you've got a plug-in? If you're going to be doing telesurgery, when do you bring that into it? What does the whole selling process end to end look like for your different type of robot or your different type of system? And unless you've got a really concrete selling, you're not going to get to enough of the end of the contracts. You're going to keep losing all the way through. And the classic is that you'll get all the way through this pipe at the end, and then they'll say, "Well, we decided to go with a Da Vinci." I don't know how many times I've heard that across the world. Well, no one gets fired for buying IBM. Remember that. That's an old saying which basically says if it's a surefire thing that everyone knows that works, then no one gets fired for buying it. But if they go with a risk of you, they do. So your selling process has to understand that and make sure that you are not trying to sell to people who ultimately are not going to buy. I'm sorry if that sounds strange, but what I mean by that is there are indicators early on whether or not that hospital is genuinely going to actually really want to buy from you. And you need to find that out really early on in your selling process. And again, I do ask hospitals to do this. You're going to put so many companies out of business and you're going to end up with a monopoly again in the world unless you really, really help the industry to do this. If you are genuinely wanting just another Da Vinci, just go and talk to Intuitive and do it. And just say to us, please don't waste your time here. Because every dollar that these small companies spend at the hospital, that they spend on you, and it costs a ferocious amount of money to be able to sell to you, you're wasting their oxygen. You're basically suffocating them. So again, I would say to hospital administrators, to buyers, because I know there was going to be a couple on the line tonight, please, 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 don't string the companies along. They're all working on too thin margins. And if you do that, you will kill the companies. So what is better is that they have a good sales process, but you all come to a mutual, very, very quickly. You come to a, this is not going to work, and then walk away. And that's one of the key things I'll say in your selling process. Know when to cut your losses and walk. You can't go after every single deal and think you're going to win it. You can think, we've got a good chance on this. The minute that you think you're not doing it, stop. Stop throwing money in on the hope that, well, they just might take us. Now, if it's just a tender where you're just literally throwing in the paperwork, have at it. But if this is going to cost you time, money, and effort, then don't do it. Just let them go with the decision they were going to make in the first place. You're not going to change their mind. But the robust selling process needs to be well documented, and it needs to be followed, and everyone in the organization needs to try and follow it in the steps that they can. Because this is an organization to organization sell. It's a business to business sell. And if you're a startup out there thinking that this is a classic sales rep to surgeon sell, you're going to fall on your ass so badly, it's untrue. The surgeons have a lot of say in this, but the administration ultimately decides on a $3.5 to $4 million investment. So you better make sure that your selling process is not surgeon heavy. Surgeon heavy is not going to win this for you. Instead, they have to be an integral part of it, really wanting your device. Not, yeah, well, if it came in, I'd give it a go. They have to really want it, because the selling process doesn't stop when they take delivery of your system. The selling process goes well beyond that to the implementation, because if you don't get multiple uses really, really fast of your device and it just lingers there doing one procedure a month, two procedures a month, that system's coming back. So onboarding after it's sold is part of the selling process. You're not sold until a year in and doing 200 procedures. That's when the system's sold. The contract and the delivery is not a genuine sale in surgical robotics. It's the 200th case with 4 users that are loving it and saying, yeah, let's just try and get more and more use of this thing. That's the sale. So that whole selling process end to end needs to end when you say, okay, they've established a service here with my robot. That's the end of the selling process. And if you think it's just selling a rep taking some surgeons out to dinner and doing a little presentation or seeing them at a booth, or this is such the opposite. It's untrue. So get that into your heads, especially for some of the smaller companies. You have to work out that selling process, agree that selling process internally, and stick to it with key decision points and key indicators that show 2 things. So you need key indicators that say, bail out, we are not going to get this. And make sure you all agree what they are. And then you can't say, but we're invested in this and we've spent so much time in this. That will kill your company. Instead, what you've got to do in that sales process is have definite mark. If you've not got X number of people having done demos and basically agreeing that they're going to try and really force this through the administration, bail out. You're just going to be wasting your time. The second KPI that you need to look at in there is, what's an indicator in there that you're having success as a company in the sales processes? And early on, it really isn't the sales number, because that's a lagging indicator. That happens after the effect and you're out of business by then. You've probably been fired by then. So what you're looking for is some really good leading indicators in surgical robotics. And the leading indicators are things like how many demos you have done for genuine prospects that really want your product. How many C-suite meetings have you had? How many pre-proposal pro formas have you got out there? Anything that is ahead of the sales curve, these should be your really good KPIs. And each of you needs to find your own, but you need a really good KPI as an organization of what means we're potentially going to land some business. Because waiting for the sales, I think that's a very risky thing, especially when you're burning through cash. Let's talk a little bit about specifics on tenders and contracting, because we've got 9 minutes left before I get into the big Q&A session, which I've got. So specifics on tenders and contracting. If you're in a tender market, and there's a lot of people I know, looking online, there's a lot of people from all around the world on here. So if you're in a tender market, Those who don't know what a tender is, this is where it's like a formal bid goes out and there's a structure of what you need to provide as the product and service, and then it goes into sealed envelopes. Yeah, right. It goes into sealed envelopes, and then they get open, and the ones that get the best criteria, 60% on technical and 40% on the price of the offer. And it's basically some kind of auctioning mechanism that was created to try and drive prices down, and it doesn't work that well. But anyway, part of that, or through, if someone puts out a request for an offer or a request for a bid, you've got to try and really understand if the first time that you have contact is when the tender or the contracting offer gets requested, you've failed. I don't think I would ever allow anyone ever again to just respond to a tender bid. And the reason for that is that if that tender bid's come out, there's probably another company has already shaped the tender. And for those that don't know what shaping the tender is, what's happened is there's been a lot of prior work going on where they've worked with key stakeholders that will be deciding the tender, from the surgeons to the C-suite, and they will have been shaping and I don't use the word manipulating. Oh yeah, manipulating. They were shaping and sort of manipulating the way that the tender is written. Let me give you an example. If I say that there's a tender that comes out that says the robot must have 4 carts independent with arms mounted on them and an open console where it must be able to see the rest of the room, and you must be able to also provide an array of laparoscopic equipment that goes with this. We don't need a stapler today, but we would like to have a bipolar energy device. Now, anyone who's in the business should be able to name that robot that's been written for. Okay, so somebody's written that somewhere. Tenders and real contracts shouldn't be written that way. If you actually look into things like European law, they have to be, they can't be that specific. They have to say they have a console or a means to be able to view the surgical scene. It has to have numerous plurality of arms to be a multi-arm robot. Can't say they're on carts or on a boom. But if you start seeing tenders that are written and shaped that way, that means you've already lost. It means that somebody there somewhere really wants that. It does happen sometimes to do copy and paste from other tenders, by the way, old tenders. They find an old tender, the person running the tender is really busy and just picks that up and says, okay, just stick that out and send that as the request for the quote or the request for the tender. But if that's happening, you've already lost. Instead, what should be happening is 6 to 9 to 12 months before that tender ever comes out, you should be in there shaping that. So you should be making, if you've got a closed console, it should be more towards a closed console design. If you've got an open console, it should be more to an open console design, in the right subtle way that you should be trying to shape the tenders. Or you should be trying to make it a really neutral tender, which says a console. That's the official and proper way that you should be doing it. If you do that, then you've got a chance that you can win it. You've also got to watch for things on the tenders like feature matching. So if you see things on there like it's got to have a Firefly ICG, okay, that's a bad way to say it. It needs to say it needs some kind of advanced imaging, but does it really need ICG on there? And in the shaping of the tender and the pre-discussions before that gets written into the tender, because then it's too late, have you been able to say to people, you don't use ICG? Now, if it's a gynecology unit in certain countries, it's now obligatory, so therefore it has to go in. But then you want to make sure that this is then not for, if it's just for the urologist and they're not going to use ICG, why is that written in the tender? You've got to try and make sure also that you explain to the administration that if you allow the feature match to say you need to have an articulated bipolar advanced energy, an articulator robot driven stapler, you've got to have X, Y, and Z, an insufflator built into your tower, you've got to have this, and this. The administration needs to understand they've basically closed the tender. Nobody else can win except for one company. And that's not good. And that's not the point of a tender. So if that's what they're trying to do, fine. Then don't you go for the tender, because you're going to lose. I guarantee it. Instead, if you've shaped and worked with the people the correct way, the tender gets written in a very generic way, or the request for a contract gets written in a very generic way. The minimum features should be this. The minimum specialties should be this. However, it can be fine to have these. Because if not, you're going to get locked out of so many tenders every single time. And there's so many companies that have still not worked this out yet in the right way that you need to be shaping that well in advance. If you're just responding to tenders, I wouldn't even respond. It's very rare that you're going to actually win it. And if you do win it, everyone's going to hate you and they're going to make sure that your robot fails anyway. And what I mean by that, so basically, let's say that um, 6 out of 7 surgeons absolutely wanted a new robot brand X. And you come in and you convince somebody somewhere, and somebody on the administration decides to buy your cheap robot, and they buy your robot. And that one user says, it's okay, it's quite good. Guarantee you those other 6 are going to tell you every reason why it's crap, every reason why it doesn't work. Every time there's a small fault or a small software tilt or an instrument doesn't work quite well, or this doesn't work or that doesn't work, or you weren't there for the service or you weren't there for the case, your robot's coming back. And I bet that's resonating with a load of people who said, yeah, the robot came back. And it's not because your robot was bad. It's not because what you did was bad. It's because the people who wanted the robot, they absolutely wanted a brand X, and it was brand Y was rammed down their throat by administration. So therefore, you were set up to fail from the beginning. And you won't get people wanting to use it, and they'll all go and revert to the other robot they've got sitting in the corner, and it'll be a disaster. So there we go so far. Yeah, make sure you feature match, make sure that you've got your tenders done well in advance, and as a company as well, start looking at benchmarks. If everybody out there has got an advanced energy, get a freaking advanced energy. Don't be sat there in your boardroom saying, well, we'll get that later. You're not going to end up selling. If 3 people on a tender genuinely have really good advanced energy and you don't have it, you're done. If they have really good digital ecosystems and you don't have it, you're done. So make sure that your upstream marketing teams and your R&D teams are not sitting in a bubble inside the company just designing what they want to design. They've got to go and look what are the feature sets that the top 3 or 4 companies have now got, because that's what's going to go out on these tender specs. That's what people are going to expect. That's what they're going to want. If everybody's able to switch between ICG and not ICG, and you don't have ICG, you're not getting bought. It's really, really simple. No matter how good your actual arms move and stuff, it's not getting bought. If there's certain feature sets that are out there, and again, keep going to my blog and looking at I keep trying to tell everyone the feature sets. Your R&D team should absolutely be making sure that the feature sets are coming on the robot, or at least they know what they need to be in the roadmap. And they can't be 5 years from today if everyone's got them today, because you'll be out of all the tenders. So that's the first block that I wanted to do, and we're up on the first hour. If there's any particular question now of what I've just said, I've got 1-2 minutes just to clarify. Otherwise, I'll go on to the Q&A in a minute, which is going to be here in a minute. I'm going to get to the Q&A. I'm going to have a quick drink.